Okay, today what I want to cover is how to set up a tracing plane inside of Max and how to get your best display out of that. One of the things I see a lot of people struggling with is how to get a good quality image on their tracing plane in Max to model to, because Max by its default settings doesn't give you a very good look on your tracing plane. The quality is not very good. So I'm going to show several different ways to do that, several aspects that you want to help to control that to get a better quality image. And there are certain different areas that we're going to go into. We're going to talk about image resolution. We'll talk about display resolution. That's the display settings inside of Max. What image file format's best? Okay, JPEG, Target, TIFF, what kind of file format? And then we're also talking about the shader. What kind of shader you want to use in there? Most people use a standard shader. It's not a very good shader for doing your display. So I'm going to go over a lot of that, and I've got some demonstration to show you. And then we're going to actually go inside and we'll set something up, and so I can show you how to set all this up. So that's what I'm going to cover in my lecture today is let's get a good image inside of Max, because Max by default's crap images in Max. Let's get a better quality image. Okay. All right, let's go forward. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about is image resolution. Most people, when they're creating, their initial drawings and stuff, will maybe creating them at a low resolution, like a 72 DPI, and that's fine. So the one image I'm going to be playing with today, the artist created in 72 DPI. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take that image and I'm going to resample it. And I've got three images right here. This is what the image looks like inside of Max at 72 DPI. This is what it looks like at 150 DPI. And this is what it looks like at 300 DPI. Now, the kind of strange thing about this is really the same image, just resampled inside of Max. Okay. It's something about the display inside of the nitrous display that's inside of Max that it likes a higher resolution image. You know, this image is not a higher quality in this one because this is just a 300 DPI image of this 72 DPI image. So it's not a higher quality image. So it's not like what I'm saying is, you know, with the obvious, which is a 300 DPI image is better than a 72 DPI. This is kind of a strange little phenomena that if you have a 72 DPI image, let's say something you downloaded from the internet, it's going to be 72 DPI. If you just take it into Photoshop and you sample it up to 300 DPI and use that for your tracing plane, it's going to look much better inside of Max. Okay, so here is a piece that one of my students did. Very nice drawing, ready to do some character modeling with. And this is a 72 DPI image, okay? So if I come in here, you'll see that it's a 72 DPI image. Okay, so all I'm going to want to do is make sure I just leave this resampling on and come in here and type this to 300 and click OK. And this will resample this image and it will pop it up to a higher resolution. Now, it's not adding quality or resolution to this in a certain sense because it's still just a 72 DPI image, okay, that just happens to be now at 300 DPI. Okay, so you can see the quality of it is not that good, but there's just something about Max that it likes a higher resolution when it's actually doing its display in there. So it's the same image, but it's just because we changed the resolution, the quality is going to be a little bit better in there. Okay, so it's kind of a little odd thing, but that's one of the first things you want to do is take your image into Photoshop and just resample it to 300 DPI, and you can see the difference in these. And I'm going to put this pin up where you guys, because on the video, I'm not sure how much of this stuff you can see. So I'll put this pin up. I'll tag it in there so you can download it and can see the difference in. Okay. Now, the next thing in here is the display resolution that's inside of Max. Okay. So this display that I'm using in Max, and where these are all screen grabbed from, is I'm using the default nitrous display that's inside of Max. It's using Direct 3D 11. I'm using an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 550. Okay, that's not a great, it's a pretty decent display card, but not a great display card. So I'm not using some really high-end workstation display card. And this is the settings that will change inside of Max. So in other words, by default, Max is going to give you this one right here. So the default settings inside of Max is a display of 512 pixels. And I'll show you how to go in and set this in a few minutes. This is what the default is. Okay. So what I did was your traditional just doubled these to see what the resolution would be as I doubled them. So this is 512, double that to 1024. You can see it's much better quality. Double this to a 2048. You can see that quality is much better. And then I doubled it to a 4096 right here. And then 8192 doubled that and then doubled it again. Okay. And what you're going to see is that this 8192, okay, is the best quality that we can get. Okay. Now there's a point of diminished returns because when I doubled that setting inside here, this one actually doesn't look as good. This one's kind of reverted back to this kind of 4096 look. Now the 4096 looks pretty good, but this 8192, which is, you know, double of the 4096, is a very high quality. So that's what we're going to go for, is we're going to set our settings up for 8192 pixels inside of the max display settings. Okay. So we're going to go for a 300 DPI image that we're going to be loading in, and then we're going to set up our resolution for this. Now, another thing you need to consider is the file formats. Okay. The file formats themselves, whether we save out a JPEG, a Targa, a TIFF. I did a JPEG, I did a Targa, I did a TIFF, I did a PNG, a Photoshop file, and a BMP file. Okay. And most people are just leaving things as garbage JPEGs. People, I don't know why they're infatuated with JPEG. I just discussed what they download on the internet, but you know, JPEGs are garbage files. They're crap files. We don't want to use them most of the time. You know, they're great for websites because they download, you know, small, but they're not really good for doing anything of quality. And you'll see there's quite a bit of difference between this JPEG, which is really kind of fuzzy, and this Targa file. Okay. Now, of all the ones that I saved out of here, to me, the Targa and the TIFF were the two best ones. Okay. Now, I also put how big the file format was saved to. Okay. The Targa is the best one. Now, it's a pretty big file. Okay. It's a 64 meg file, but really we're not getting into a point like we're rendering and using a 64 meg texture file in here, because this is just for the display purposes for some Model 2. So this amount of, 64 meg it's not really going to bog our system down. Okay. I go for a Targa over a TIFF because a Targa doesn't have ability to save layers. TIFFs do. And so you could bog the system down if you didn't flatten a TIFF. And so I have a tendency just not to use TIFFs. I use Targas. I use TIFFs for construction, like where I'm storing layers and stuff in. Okay. So for my workflow, TIFF is a construction file. I'll have multiple layers and stuff in it when I'm building textures or whatever. But then I want to apply them onto something in Max, then I flatten them to a Targa, so I know it's a flat image, and that the Max's internal development system, in which is having to interpolate this information, doesn't have to interpolate a bunch of layers. I know it's flat, it's a Targa. Okay. I thought maybe the PNG would be pretty good, but when I did it, the PNG is just as fuzzy as the JPEG. Okay. The Targa and the TIFFs were the cleanest ones. So I'm going to go for the Targa. Okay. So right now what we're looking at is I'm going to upsample my image from 72 DPI to 300 DPI. I'm going to go inside and set my display resolution inside of Max to 8192 pixels for what it's going to be displaying. I'm going to save it out as a Targa file. Even if I started with a JPEG, I'm going to save the JPEG as a Targa file, and then it'll be much cleaner in my display. Okay, then the last thing I want to talk about is the actual material, the shader, the material that you're putting it on. Most people, are not, they haven't know enough about Max. Standard shaders is what people know, and standard shaders are stupid shaders. They're not very good shaders. In the current world of, physical based rendering and such, we don't ever really use standard shaders anymore. I see a lot of people using them. They're stupid shaders, Well, here's what a standard shader looks like inside of Max. Okay, this is a standard shader. This is a standard shader with 100% self-illumination. You'll see that most of these are not really white. Okay, there's white up there. These are kind of gray because they're showing the shader in the viewport. We're not rendering it. So you can set a standard shader to 100% self-illumination, and then it'll be much whiter. But still, it's a pretty fuzzy shader. It's not a very good shader. Now, here's a mental ray shader, an Argent Design shader. This is a much better quality shader than a standard shader, but even at here, it's still pretty fuzzy. It's a little bit better than the standard, but not much. Now, that's because what we're doing right here is we're still, through all of these, we're just using a software shader. Okay. We're not using a hardware shader. Okay. Max, when you get down to your Argent Designs, we can use hardware shaders. And these down here are where we shifted to a hardware shader instead of a software shader. And so what I have is two of them here. I have an Argent Design here, and I've set this to self-illumination. And this is an Argent Design without self-illumination. And you'll see that as far as the quality, they're both pretty good, but you'll see the black is a little bit more intense on the self-illumination than it is on the actual Argent Design, just standard hardware. So I'm going to be using a self-illumination. And so that's going to get us the best quality that we can possibly get inside of Max. And so we'll just go back over this one more time. So image resolution, when we're kicking out our image out of out of Photoshop, 300 DPI. Okay. Even if we create it as a 72 DPI, just resample it to 300 DPI. Okay. Then we're going to go inside and I'll show you how to set this up. We're going to set our display settings inside of Max, and we're going to set those for 8192 pixels for what it's going to be displaying. And then on our file formats, I'm going to take my file, even if somebody saved it as JPEGs, I'm going to save it as a Targa file. The quality will be better if it's a Targa file, so I'm going to save it as a Targa file out of Photoshop. And then when I come in and I'm going to be putting it on my tracing plane, I'm going to be using a shader, and the shader I'm going to be using is going to be an arch and design. And then I'm going to set the arch and design up to be a hardware display versus a software display. And I'm going to set it up for 100% self-illumination. Okay, so let's go inside of Max and let's set something up. Okay, so here we are in Max. So let's kind of set it up. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a display from the front viewport. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and set in a plane. Okay, now it doesn't really matter how big the plane is right now. And a lot of people, going, oh, well, it's got to be a certain percentage and we have to open up the image and copy the proportions of the image and put on the plane. That's all crap. I don't have to do any of that. Okay, I'm not saying you can't do that, but that's just a waste of time to me. Okay, so I'm just making a plane in here. And I don't really know what the proportions of the plane needs to be to put our image in there, but I don't really care at this point because I'll fix all that later. Now I want to go ahead and I'm just going to right click on move and right click on my little tumblers down here to go ahead and just zero it out. Now, one of the things that I see people do is because by default in Max, when you make this plane, it gives you 4 subdivisions and people leave this in here. We don't want these subdivisions in here. I don't want to see this wireframe in my image in here. These need to be zeroed out. Okay. Once I get this zeroed out, then this plane is ready for me to use. So I just want to go ahead and convert it to an editable poly right now. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring up my material editor. And what we're going to do in the material editor is we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and get us some, we'll go ahead and give us a map in here. So we're going to go ahead and bitmap, and we'll load in our image. Okay, load that up. All right, and actually I've loaded it up twice in here because I'm going to show you, this is my resampled image, okay, that we've got quality piece from, and then this one is the original one. So I'm going to show you both of these and the difference of how it looks inside of Max. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and grab us an arch and design material, okay, and then we're going to go in here. Let's go ahead and shade our viewport, okay. Now a lot of people shade realistic, that's okay. And we'll put this shader on here. And then let's go ahead and use our low quality image that we'll put in our arch and design. And then we're just going to click this button right here, which will show our material in the viewport. And then we're going to go ahead and turn our shader on to self-illumination. Okay. Now, the problem you're going to get into is when you do self-illumination, you're no longer going to be able to see your image in there. Okay. It kind of throws people off. Matter of fact, I'll wait until we do the next stage to do that so you can kind of see this. Okay, I don't need my grid on here. I'm going to turn my grid off. Okay. Now, as you can see, the quality of the image in here is not very good. That's just the way it is in Max. Now, another thing that I see a lot of people, a mistake that people do, is to get this image to be the correct size and the correct proportions, they want to use the scale tool. So they'll right click and click the scale tool. This scale tool is horrible. You want to stay away from it. You don't want to use it. I'm not saying you can't, but you have to kind of know what you're doing in order to use it. Okay. Now here is the proportions. Now a lot of people just throw it on there and then they start, they start modeling. Okay. The thing about it is if I throw this on here, it's distorted. It's not the right proportions. Okay. Even if I come in here and put a UVW map on this, okay, the map is sticking to the size of this image. And so it's all distorted. And I see people do this all the time and they're building their models and they're all out of proportions and distorted. You got to set your tracing plane up correctly or you're just building something that's going to be nasty looking. Okay. Now, a lot of times what I see people do is they'll come and go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to kind of scale this to get it where I think it's kind of right. Okay. And we're going to go, yeah, see, that's better. And I'm going to go, yeah, that's crap. Don't do that. That's stupid. Okay. And here's why. You just screwed up this piece of geometry. This geometry is totally screwed up now to the world. There are two types of coordinate systems inside of a 3D system. You have object coordinates and you have world coordinates. And when we're doing certain kinds of things, especially physical based rendering, we need the object coordinates and the world coordinates to understand each other. This coordinate is totally screwed up once you go in here and start using the scale tool on it. Okay. Now, what I'll show you is I'm going to go in here and do a UVW map on here. Okay. So I put a UVW mapping coordinate on here. All right. Now, the best thing when you're putting your UVW mapping is there's a button right down here that says bitmap fit. And what it will do is automatically make your mapping coordinate the perfect size for your image. We're not guessing at it. Oh, it's a wonderful thing. Okay, let's go down here. All right, we're going to pick this, okay, and we're going to actually put it on here, okay? And what happened to our image here, okay? Now it's distorted, okay? It's not correct, okay? Can you see how much wider this is? And that's because I actually came in and put a scale on this and totally screwed this plane up, okay? Don't be using the scale. Okay, if you want the plane to be another size, then when you made the plane, make it another size. Now, I'm going to show you how to fix this, though. Okay, I'm going to show you how to realign this plane so it's aligned to the world again. So let's dump this UVW mapping off here. Once I've used this scale tool, okay, whatever I want it to be, once I've used, scaled this, it's like it's toast. Okay, so what you want to do is go to your utility up here, and this will happen inside of Maya too. I mean, yes, I'm using Max to demonstrate this, but these are almost the same things in Maya. You'll distort things in Maya too. If I was to put a checkerboard on this, okay, and let's just do that real quick. Okay, let me go ahead and just put a checker material on this to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So let's put a checker on this over here. And then I'm going to set my checker to say, 20 by 20. Okay, and these are perfect squares, right? But look on here, it's not perfect squares because you scaled this, okay? We don't want this to be scaled, but let's say you already did it. Oh my gosh, you went ahead and scaled it. Scaled it. Okay, here's how you fix it. You go to your utility. We're going to go over here to reset the X form, and then I'm going to click reset selected, and I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. This resets this information so that now we can put a correct mapping coordinate on it, okay? So now when I come in here and I put a UVW map on this, okay, I'm going to go view align and fit to the surface. And now when I change this to be square, okay, so this coordinate to be square again, I'm going to use the height here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this height and put it on the width so that they're the same. It's square. And look, everything is squares now. They're no longer rectangles. Okay, so I've fixed this issue. Okay, resetting the X form. Okay, you'll have to do that inside of Maya as well. It's called freeze transformations in Maya. Okay, so I put this image back in here. Okay, and now you'll see that it's actually, it's compressing it again, because what I want to do now is I want to go down here and hit this bitmap fit and pick the object and click OK. And now it's perfectly matched the mapping coordinate to my drawing. Okay, they're a perfect match. So there's no distortion in here at all. It's a perfect match. Now you can say, well, but it's, how come I'm showing this out here? That's because by default, a bitmap, when you bring it in, Max, it actually tiles. Okay. So right here is tiling functions. You can turn these off. Okay. I'm not going to turn them off, but you could. That's what's happening is it's tiling. Now, the problem is that this plane is too long. Okay. And that's where I was getting back before, where people will go in and measure the plane and measure the image and make them the same size. You can do all that, but here's a much easier thing. Now all I have to do is go down to my edit poly and grab vertices. Now you'll see that when I went down, it reverted back. That's fine. This button right here is called show end result. And when I click it, it's showing me the top of the stack. So it's showing me up there. So I can be down here and I can grab these vertices and just move them in. And move them in over here. And now this is the size that I need it to be. There's no distortion in it. It's the correct size. Okay, now another thing that we're going to end up doing here in a few minutes is we want to freeze this, because we want to freeze this plane so it doesn't move on us, okay? So if we go to Max and we go in here and we go freeze selection, Max by default takes the shader off when you freeze it, okay? So what you're going to want to do is to go into its properties, okay? To get into an object's properties, you just right click, you go to object properties, and inside of Max, you've got a button right here that says show frozen in gray. Okay, you turn that off and click OK. And now I can freeze it and the image will still be in there. And this is what you want to do. You want to freeze it because we don't want, once we're modeling to this, we don't want to accidentally move this. Okay. Now, another thing that we're going to want to do is, I'm going to unfreeze it right now, is you don't want it on the construction plane. So when we go to the top view, this is the construction plane. So when I'm building this on this plane. So what we want to do is slide this back a little bit, give us some room. So when I'm looking at it from the front and I'm building, I'm in front of my plane. Okay. Now, I also want to set a side view in here. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this, and I'm going to turn my angle snaps on, and I'm going to rotate it from my view here. Okay. And when I rotate it, I'm going to hold down the shift key and it'll make a copy of it. Okay. All right. Now we're going to call this our side view. And I never named the other one, so we need to do that. This is our front view. Okay, and then on my side view, I'm just going to move that. Be careful when you move in a perspective view, okay? It'll kind of throw you off. Be careful with that, that we want to constrain it. So I'm on the x-axis, and I'm going to move it off to the side here. That way, when I'm on the construction plane from the top, and I'm drawing here, it's over to the side, okay? So those will both be set back off construction planes, so it's easy for me to use. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is come in from the front. And in our front view, I don't need to see this information over here. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my vertices. Okay, make sure you have your show end result on, and I can slide this over. Okay, because all I really need to see in this case is this piece. Okay, right here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, because I've been moving this around, I'm going to go to Effect Pivot Only and center it to the object. Okay, then I'm going to get out of there, and then I'm going to go Move, and I'm going to zero everything out. So it's sitting right in the center. Okay, then I'll need to move it back a little bit again. Okay, all right, so let's go to do the same thing on this side one. So I'm going to come over here and look at it from the side view. We'll go to the right view and look at it. Turn off that grid, and then we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go in down here, vertex, show end result. I don't need to see this top part now, or the front part. And so we're going to come over here, crop in on that. Let's go ahead and center its pivot point again. Okay. Then I can right click, move. I'll center that again where I want it to be. Go back to the top and slide it back over. Okay, so now I've got both those images in there. I can pick them both and I can freeze those. And now they're where I need them to be to model with, and they're all correct, and they're registered to each other because they're just clones of each other. So I know they align up. As long as the drawings aligned up additionally when they first created them, then they're going to line up. Okay. All right, so now let's get in here to making the image look better. Okay. All right, so like I said before, we started and we were using the actual 72 DPI. So now I'm going to go ahead and drop in our 300 DPI image, and you won't see much difference, and that's because we haven't updated the display card. Okay, so what we do is right up here where this says shaded, I'm going to right click and go down here to configure. Okay. And then display performance right here, and you'll see it says texture maps, and it's showing it at 512. Okay. Now, if you remember, we wanted to come in here and we wanted to set this at 8192. Okay. So we're going to do 8192. That's divisions of 16. And then watch what happens when I hit this apply button. Don't have my my shader on. Go here and make sure that's on. And I'm going to hit this button right here to show this in our viewport. Take a second to update the display and look at the quality of that now. Okay. I'm going to tell this to be self-illuminated. Okay, that's going to deepen my black a little bit. And so I'm using the 300 DPI image. That's what I'm using. It's a Targa file. Okay. I've updated the display card. Okay, so I've gone in here, configure, change it on display performance, change this to 8192. Then I've gone into my material editor. And on the shader itself, right here, this will be off. Okay, this is off right here. This is showing software shading. When I click and hold down and I get this bottom one, now it's hardware shading. So we're actually using the hardware, not the software inside of Max, but using the hardware to display that. Okay. All right, now you'll see that I've got a pretty nice display that I can start modeling to, and I'm ready to go. Okay. Now, let's say that, and really the way this is drawn to me is kind of backwards. So in other words, if I'm going to go to the right side, so if I switch to the right side here, this to me, the guy is backwards. I want him going the other way. So I'm going to unfreeze for a second. I'm going to click on this, and I can go over here to my mapping coordinates on it, and on the U, I can tell it to flip, and it'll flip it the other way. Okay. Now, what I'm going to need to do now is to actually come in here and readjust my vertices on that again. Okay, I want it going this direction. Okay, I'm going to center that pivot again. Center the object, get out of there. Okay, and then I'm going to zero it out on the x-axis again. Okay. Slide this over. Okay, then I go ahead and freeze that again. Okay, both of these are frozen. Now from the front, nice resolution. I go to the right, and there we go. And there's that one from that point of view. So now this is all set up really nice and ready to go to actually do my modeling. Okay, so hopefully that helped you understand how to get a better image in here. Seems like a lot of people are kind of confused about that, but you can get a nice display inside of Max if you understand those aspects again. Okay, let's just run over those one more time. Okay, which are image resolution. We want a 300 DPI image. Okay, display resolution. We want to set it up to 8192. Image file format, we want to use a Targa file, and on our shaders, we want to use an arch and design with self-illumination with hardware shading set on. Okay, a Max garbage shader, like a standard shader, I would tell you for the most part. There are some times I use it to do certain kinds of things, but for the most part, Max's shaders, like a standard shader, this is a garbage shader. I see a lot of people using this. This is crap. It's a crap shader. It's a crap shader. It's a crap shader. It's a crap shader. Okay, it's a garbage shader. This is an old ancient shader. Hell, this is the same damn shader that was in 3D Studio R4 and DOS when I used to use that back in the 1980s. Okay, crap shader. Okay, you want to get into the real world, physical based shaders. Okay, there are times we use this. Like if I'm building a low quality character and I'm trying to get it set up, then I will use a standard shader, because when I bring this file, if it was to go inside a game engine, like to import it into the Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine doesn't understand an arch and design. So I would use a standard shader because I'm just using it as a host shader to hold on to the stuff until I get it in Unreal. And then I'm going to switch it over to Unreal shaders, which will be physical based shaders. Okay. But you need to get used to using arch and design shaders and having mental ray on. So going up here under your render setup. Okay. You need to have mental ray as your renderer. Okay. You don't want the default scanline render. That's ancient, old shader. Renderer. We don't use that anymore. Okay. So hopefully this helped you. And, I will put up this image. Like I said before, I'll put up this image so that you can download and look at this, because on the video, I'm sure this is kind of fuzzy. I'll post this up so that you can download that. Okay. Hope this helped you out. Thank you very much.